I will now call this regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 5:30 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Schubert?
Here.
Ms. McCall?
Present.
Ms. Bennett?
Present.
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Ms. Haley?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 members present, we have a quorum.
We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. As we start each board meeting, please make note, the mission of Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in an equitable first-class education for a changing world. I wish to welcome Superintendent Student Advisory Council Representative Logan Naley from Auburn High School. Welcome. Are there any changes, correction, or additions to the meeting minutes? If not, please nod for consensus to approve. Thank you. Ms. Stanford will now lead the stakeholder committee portion of the meeting. Ms. Stanford.
Thank you. We'll begin by showing our committee's 12-month agenda. Our feature presentation this evening will be from Dr. Antoine Reed and Jim Pearson with an update on the affinity listening sessions with scholars. But first, let's begin by celebrating the good things happening in our district. Before winter break, community volunteers visited East High School to listen to presentations from 55 newcomer scholars. These students from 13 countries prepared presentations about their favorite molecule, and then the volunteers asked the students a few questions about their molecule. 85% of these students arrived in the U.S. in the last 6 months and are just learning English and learning how to read. These new coming scholars are coming to RPS from Tanzania, Uganda, Malawi, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Yemen, Turkey, Afghanistan, Thailand, and Burma. What an inspiring event. We'd like to welcome these students to the RPS community. In the month of January, Mr. Dotson and Dr. Jarrett visited Ellis, Constance Lane, West, Jefferson, Flynn, Conklin, Lathrop, Montessori, and Fairview. Here are a couple of the pictures highlighting their visits. And featuring Earl playing dodgeball at Flynn on the girls' side. He caught a ball and got everyone back in. Way to go, Earl. We always enjoy seeing the smiling faces of students. Big congratulations to the Leaders of Tomorrow program at Lewis Lemon and Ellis for completing the first stage of this program, led by Dr. Antoine Reed. The second stage of this program will give students the opportunity to bring their insights and ideas directly to the forefront by meeting with Superintendent Dr. Jarrett and other key figures in the RPS 205 cabinet. Once again, great job to these scholars for demonstrating leadership skills and helping to empower other young voices while contributing to the betterment of our school district. Keep up the good work. After 5 years in the making, Jayhawks varsity cheer placed second at the NIC 10 conference on January 18th at Boylan High School. Head coach Micah Strick expressed her gratitude towards the team and all their hard work on Instagram after the big win, saying, "When starting at Jefferson, the main goal was to change the culture. Changing the culture means having a winning attitude." Congratulations to the Jayhawks varsity cheer team. Keep up the hard work. Beyond the boardroom, if you happen to miss the first ever RPS 205 Coffee Chat event, no worries. Listen to our latest 205 Vibe podcast episode as Earl Dotson Jr. sits down with myself to talk about the coffee chats. Hear firsthand how board members are bridging the gap and connecting with our families and community. You can listen to this podcast episode now through Spotify, Apple Music, or Google Podcasts, or go online to rps205.com and visit the 205 Vibe podcast page. Our committee met with our lobbying team, Amy Ballinger-Cole, Jeremy Duffy, and Michael Cassidy on Wednesday, January 17th, to discuss updates on TRS waivers and associated penalties, early childhood transportation reimbursement, and mental health professionals inside of schools. Please keep your eye out for legislative updates via your RPS email inboxes. Through the Emerson Grant, Early Childhood is able to host family nights at the Discovery Center. January was Bayer Early Childhood Center. Here are some pictures from the most recent Discovery Center Family Night. Upcoming events for family nights at Discovery Center are February 21st, Fairview, March 13th, Nashville, May 1st, Summerdale. What a great way to connect families to fun activities within the community. Earlier this month, Melissa Gamlin from Cherry Valley Elementary was nominated and won 97ZOK's Teacher of the Week. She was recognized for her kindness and empathy inside and outside of the classroom. Her nominator mentions how Melissa Gamlin helped her family through very difficult times and how grateful she was to her for being such a light in hard times. Congratulations to Melissa for winning Teacher of the Week, and if you'd like to read or listen to the full story, you can visit 97ZOK's website for more information. And now for our feature presentation, I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Antoine Reed and Jim Pearson for an update on the Affinity Listening Sessions with Scholars.
I think this is working? Yeah, great. So this is a really exciting moment and opportunity for me personally. Active listening was something that I presented to all of you as a strategy back in October. And to see that strategy come to life in the way that it has, the sophistication of the students, the collaboration, the process in which we established with Dr. Reed and the DEI team, has really led to some really incredible results, and we're excited to share those with you tonight. To me, active listening was always about what the community wants and what the community needs from us. And it's all about relationships. And with relationships, there are opportunities to talk, there's opportunities to listen and share. And we knew that this was an opportunity for us to start to build that bridge between the district and the community through what I wrote down in October, which was to close our mouths and open our ears. I thought that was really funny because all those months ago I was relatively new, and that still holds true today. It was our opportunity to sit down with the community and let them know that they're finally heard. And just to give you a reminder of what active listening is a collaboration between DEI and the communications team to bring to life a strategy that will allow us to essentially do research. We set up an environment where we meet with students, teachers, our community. We ask questions and then we listen. It's an opportunity to really put our shared commitment to excellence into practice. We're in an effort to shape an educational environment that does indeed foster growth and inclusivity. And ultimately, what we learn will help shape our decision making so that we can prepare students for the complexities of a crazy modern world. And so what we did was, starting with high school and middle school students across most of our district, is create a trusting, open, shared space for dialogue and learning. We learned what works. We learned what doesn't, And most of all, we walked away with their perspective on what change is necessary to really instill and create success for their futures. And what we learned through these conversations was at the heart of their experience was a lot of joy, a lot of passion, a lot of heartache, and a lot of honesty. I came away with the understanding that really knowing what they feel, really understanding what they expect, while may not be able to change the past, can definitely create a roadmap to success for the future. It's a process and an opportunity for us to really develop themes and insights around what we need to do to drive effective change for these students. The conversations were extraordinary. The interactions were honest. It was because of the work of Dr. Reed and Kate that we were able to have a dialogue that kind of blew me away. And I think tonight we're all going to learn something interesting. I think we're going to walk away with a shared passion and a commitment to the type of change that we need to make for these students. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Reed to walk you through a number of themes and insights that we drew from the research.
You might stay not quick.
You want me to click here?
Yes, indeed. So first of all, I just want to thank Dr. Jared for his forward thinking, our cabinet, Earl's team. You all did a phenomenal job. So don't shoot the messenger. I want to start off by saying that this is directly from the scholars. So some of these videos I want to play twice because the first one especially, when we get done with this presentation, I hope that we would not just be content experts, but scholar experts. Because when we make our plans, I want to make sure that we understand that the plans, when you're in a service community, you have to listen to who you're serving in order to serve. So many times we develop things for and not with. So at the end of this presentation, I hope we understand how we can do things with our scholars. So the first thing that came out was challenges of navigating an educational maze. Now, RPS is a very large district where it's a lot of things that happen. And you're going to hear scholars just talk about some simple things that they need in order to just start a school year. Sitting at Guilford, one of the scholars said, hey, look, I'm a junior. And still on the first day of school, I don't know where to go. It's chaos. Everything is moving but me. And so I'm likely going to be late for my first couple of classes. We need a different onboarding. You're going to hear scholars talk about their experience of having a dynamic way to express just the maze of understanding how grades are portrayed out. So I'm going to play this first video, and then we're going to dive into this topic here.
All tests are 90% in like the paper that just like random homeworks. They're 10%, but some people are really, really good test takers, and some people are really bad test takers. Like, for example, I'm a really bad test taker, and that affects my grade.
I'm going to play that one more time. I want to make sure you caught that one.
All tests are 90% in like the paper that just like random homeworks. They're 10%, but some people are really, really good test takers, and some people are really bad test takers. Like, for example, I'm a really bad test taker, and that affects my grade.
So here you hear the scholar talking about one of the things we've heard a lot lately is that's 90-10, and their understanding of how the 90-10 is used. And when the scholars are looking at the 90-10, their frustration and fear is that, hey, look, if I don't test well, I can't pass. And I don't have other ways to master showing what I've learned. And so they do need a better understanding of how the 90-10 is used. I think we have some great things in place now to explain that. But the scholars were really frustrated about their ability to be able to show, what they mastered when they come to education and testing. They felt that if I don't test good, I don't have a way to show up. And then the next slide, we go to it. The scholars really talked about their experience of emphasizing how they learn and what they understand and how their cultures show up in their learning. Many of the scholars talked about the evolving world and how prepared they are in our world by what we're giving out in our aspirations inside of the curriculum. Next slide. Students would like to acknowledge their diverse learning experience. On the calls, we heard consistently about the ways scholars learn. The student body is unique. They have strengths and weaknesses, and we believe in the diversity of learning. And one of the things that came out, and it's been talked about consistently, is how did we learn? And scholars wanted to challenge us about how they learn. I know we understood COVID kind of changed how scholars looked at learning. They get bored quick. They look at things totally different. Their attention span has kind of changed. And one of the things scholars talk to me about is it always reminds me, one of the scholars said, how did we learn the ABCs? Everybody in here could tell me how you learn the ABCs. You learn it through a song. You learn it through rhythm. If you got assessed on the ABCs and you say A, B, you learned it how? You say A, B, C, D. It was a rhythm to it, right? And scholars learn through a rhythmatic approach. And we talked about that even before I did this. And various scholars learn various ways, and until we address how they learn, they continue to feel left out in how we teach. So once again, I want to get back to the focus of not being a content expert only, but a scholar expert. And we have to make sure that the scholar's voice was that we get everybody experience to the table, and how everybody learns is important at the table, so we can foster an inclusive learning environment. So then the next thing that the scholars were really key on is the teacher relationship. And one of the things that was important, that they had a positive experience with their teachers. The students emphasized the need to have more open communication, more meaningful interaction with their educators, so they can foster a more nurturing environment. And for their understanding, they knew that they needed a space to do that. And we begin to look at what space allows that creativity for you to have that dialogue with your teacher, because that is a very meaningful space to our scholars, that relationship they build in that classroom. So we looked at how we onboard the school year and how scholars wanted to start the school year. They do want to start in a space where they build relationships. And we call it the rubber band theory. One of the scholars at West talked about it, where if you take a rubber band and you pull it back a little bit, it's going to go a little far away. But if you pull it real far back, it's going to shoot out further. They talked about the onboarding of the school year like that rubber band. We need to pull back more and get away from some of our traditional things and build those relationships so we can shoot out further as the year goes on. Building that strong relationship early goes a long way down the road. The next part, I think, is something that the scholars were very happy with us about. They talked about a lot about the increasing need for a diverse population. Many scholars talked about not having a teacher that reflected them in math and in various topics, and they believe that a diverse teaching staff enriches them. It enhances their educational experience. It gives them a model to look after. So we wanted to make sure that we were clear on some of our steps, but the scholars said that we need to shake up our staff and make sure we infuse it with more diversity. It's easy to heal something that you can feel when you understand the walk of a scholar, and the data shows that when you have that diversity, some of the outcomes. And then next was a clear guidance and understanding of postgraduate pathways and exploring diverse paths of instruction and opportunities. The scholars thought it was essential that we looked at college, career, and beyond, and other pathways. We shared the story about, why, Roosevelt, why scholars were showing up, because they felt that they were attached to a certain pathway and an opportunity, and they had things that were more hands-on. One of the things that continued to come out of every listening session is scholars continue to say, we got to get our hands on something. We can't just sit there in front of a Chromebook and at a desk in a traditional sense anymore. One of the scholars said, just take me outside. I'll learn math by running. I'll learn math by doing something, but I cannot sit in front of a desk and just learn that way. Lecture is the least important way for our scholars to learn. They want to get hands-on. They want to experience learning. And this was an opportunity that our scholars felt very passionate about, pathways and opportunities to college, career, and beyond, and making sure that we are displaying that throughout our educational experiences. The next bigger topic right after 90-10 was definitely the violence in our schools. The fighting had become something that you would think that scholars were not versed on, but scholars were very versed on this topic. And I was blinded to think that school was a safe space. And when scholars began to talk to me, they said, hey, well, Dr. Reed, you got to remember that when you're saying school is a safe space and come to school, is it really a safe space? It's a space that I can get ridiculed for not learning the right way. It's a space that I can get ridiculed for being bullied. It's a space that if you want to find me because I'm in some altercation outside of the school, you can meet me at the school. So if we want to come to school, you got to make sure it's really a safe space. And so we're going to play this video of a scholar talking about what is happening with the fighting in many schools. And I want to say this is not RPS-centric. This is going on across America. So this is not something RPS is dealing with, but we're here to talk about RPS. But I wanted you to hear the scholar talk about why the violence in the schools.
A lot of people fight in the school because they scared, so they know the teacher's going to stop it, so they're going to fight where they know it's going to be, like, dealt with. Because nobody's stopping you in the streets.
So this scholar is saying that essentially out in the streets, the outcome may be different. But if I fight in the school, there's security there. There's somebody to break it up. And another thing with fighting in the school is everything that you see in the community, it culminates, it comes together in that one space. Where if you notice in some areas, I can't walk 2 and 3 blocks because I may see an adversary. But in school, everybody is in that same space. And I would rather safely fight in the school where somebody's going to break it up than fight outside. So surprisingly, some scholars felt that school was a safe space to have physical confrontation. And it raised a question about how we measure our effectiveness of dealing with that and fostering a truly safe, supportive atmosphere. We need to adopt a multi-approach to this, of interventions and eliminating the perception that schools are a safe place to fight. And we also have to make sure we are clear on the perception of what school really is and is it really a safe space and how we make it a safe space. If our counselors and social workers are busy breaking up the fights, they're not on the front end dealing with the things that our scholars are dealing with in step 1, which is building an atmosphere of a safe space. Next slide. Social media. That's probably one of the social media platforms there, but we'll keep moving. What happened in that COVID was those scholars had a lot of idle time, right? They might have had 1 page, 2 pages, but they picked up all the pages then. They went from TikToking, Gramming, and everything else, right? But what do you see on social media? So when you're looking at social media now, what sells and what they're looking at is violence. And it became cool to show violence. All the challenges were related to violence, tearing something up, ripping something down. So when scholars got back into school, they wanted to show off all that stuff they had saw on social media and see who could do it the best. And our schools became a ground when scholars came back, and they had to struggle with understanding what real life was versus the virtual world, and they began to display a lot of that in our schools. Finding a solution for social media is a comprehensive approach. And we have to understand the various ages that scholars are using social media, the various platforms, and the influence that social media is having on our youth. Because we can't get in all those spaces. That is definitely a space that the scholars talked about. They had to be there to help resolve that. They had to lead that space. Because we'll pick up on a social media in 2 weeks from now to be a whole new platform. Social media also has become a place where gangs are harboring various things, where they're advertising on social media. They're meeting in bathrooms. The scholar talked about, hey, when you see a group of kids going to the bathroom, Dr. Reed, they're not really going to the bathroom nowadays. They're going to meet up to do some things. Because usually on social media, I can tell you, hey, tomorrow during lunch period at such and such time, we're going to meet here. That was what a scholar told me. And they're using the bathrooms. They're using various spaces to do certain things that they see on social media. Next slide. The post-COVID era has ushered a new set of challenges, particularly in the realm of soft skills. The pandemic has disrupted the scholar's ability to understand how to resolve conflict peacefully. And we have to promote conflict resolution. We have to promote it in our classroom environment, in our hallways, in our cafeteria. We have to promote it at home, and we have to example it in everything that we do. Our scholars, whether you know it or not, are afraid. I remember being a principal at this stage, and I never understood why seniors were so afraid. An afraid senior was not an equipped senior. That means the journey they took did not prepare them for the world that they were about to face. And I would have scholars continue to get suspended and fight, and when I was listening to the scholars on the listening session, one of the things I heard was the fear and the want for something to be bigger than what they were seeing every day. I remember a scholar just telling me, I said, why do you all like that social media? Why do you all stay in that space? And we'll talk about technology a little more. But the scholar simply said, I'd rather stay on social media than the real world. I'd rather be on my phone or a virtual space than the society we're creating. Because the society that sometimes that I see is scary, and it doesn't include me, and it's not something that I'm sure about. But at least in the virtual world, I know what's going on. At least on social media, I can get away, and it became an escape. So social media is not going anywhere, but our opportunity to utilize it as a positive force with our scholars is an opportunity that we should take upon for our scholars, because I think they want to use social media the right way. It was just not a negative conversation. There are some positive things. I remember the scholar at East said, hey, look, I can learn everything that I learned in the classroom in 2 months right here on my TikTok. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, but that was a statement the scholar made. Next slide. The issue of violence in schools is also intermingled with immaturity. As students begin to reflect, I'm not sure if we can blame it on COVID or a lack of emotional maturity or lack of dealing with impulses or an increasing understanding of the likelihood of conflict, because it became to be cool to be involved in this conflict nowadays. How we stress the importance of fostering emotional growth is very important. And I heard the scholars clearly talk about a need to get a better relationship with their counselors and their social workers, to have that conversation. And I can remember in the fear of the scholars saying, hey, I just need somebody to talk to. And you would be surprised how eager these scholars were to talk. I don't think, Kate, we had a scholar that was shy about anything. I had to close the call out because the scholars were ready to stay on that call and just keep talking. And that just reminded me about how important education is. But I just thought back how many times we had this conversation before we started developing our planning. Because I wish I knew these things prior to a lot of decisions I made. It would have made me think about the approach a lot different. We're here to serve the scholar, but we leave them out at the table a lot of times when we're making decisions. Next slide. Promoting mental health. Go ahead.
I know people who have used mental health days who have called the school, and the school will kind of belittle them and say, well, if you use another one, you're going to be directed to a counselor.
So that scholar was explaining the fear, being ridiculed for using the mental health days. And it was a balance to that, because it was a conversation about, using them effectively in the process for it. And they really felt that, using the mental health days, they were ridiculed for doing it. They were saying they were not really needed. And there were some scholars that said and admitted that, yeah, we had to be intentional about what we used it for. We didn't follow the process. But students highlighted that there's a gap between the perception and importance of mental health, that they needed a dialogue about it, because mental health issues are something that are rampant, and that they're feeling that we're not looking at it from the lens of scholars. They want us to look at it from the lens that, hey, it's tough just to get up in the morning some days now. I want to stay home, is what one of the scholars said. COVID taught me that I can stay home. So just to get up and come to this school is a tough task many days. And I don't have nobody pushing me out the bed, Dr. Reed. I do this on my own. So when everybody else is encouraged to come to school, I'm dragging myself out the bed. And then I get here and I'm talked to and I'm lectured at. I'm not listened to. So it's traumatizing for me to come in the space when I'm not valued in the space. Next slide. Students express their need for a more robust support system within our schools to address mental health concerns. How do we create an environment that fosters emotional well-being? And I'm not going to lie, but sometimes from the old school, that was looked at different. That is over with. Our scholars are dealing with things that we probably never experienced in our childhood growing up. If you're my age, I'm old. Growing up, we didn't have social media like this. We didn't have platforms that can get everything together that fast. Everything is moving so fast for the scholar, and sometimes they just need us to slow it down. And to slow it down for them sometimes means listen to them. When you keep talking at a scholar, you continue to belittle their understanding and knowledge. But when you sit back and listen, you show them that, hey, I value you. And I will tell you, anybody that's in this room, when you know that a scholar knows you value them, they will run over the mountain for you, under it, and through it for you. But we have to create those spaces for our scholars. Students emphasize the necessity of raising awareness about things that are available in the community. When I got out here, that was one of the most glaring things. It was hard to get to things. I wanted resources. And I was telling myself, if I can't get stuff quickly, I can only imagine the struggle to not have unified communication for our scholars to quickly get to services they need. They wanted a more comprehensive understanding on the services and supports for our scholars that are easy to get to ensure that parents are informed and parents also have those same tools. When I got to this part, it became a little woozy for me because I remember riding the bus. And I remember just watching a scholar one day. We were on the bus, and then I said, "Where's your brother at?" Well, my brother was in the hotel. And now my brother's not in the hotel. Well, where's your brother at now? Chicago. 2 weeks later, where's your brother at? My brother's in Milwaukee. And so I'm thinking to myself, where's the support to get this family stabilized in a place that they can learn? So if a scholar is dealing with where their brother is, can we imagine how important a math assessment is to that scholar? So the need to bring awareness to things and tools to our scholar is very important. This arena called education was not built the way it's needed and designed for today's scholar. And I think COVID taught us that. The things that we did before COVID, we have to totally look at it differently now. And from what my scholars are saying, a lot of times, and I'm not saying RPS, we put up really good wallpaper, and wallpaper looks good. But behind that wallpaper is a need for dismantling the same systems that continue to plague our scholars and not allow them to express what they really need. And it should be easy for scholars to get these opportunities. They should not have to look for them. They should be readily available. And that tool is not available to our scholars because they're crying out everywhere we're going. They're crying out in the community for things to do. They're crying out in our schools to be more hands-on. And so it's becoming a space that we have to re-look at what we're doing. I think we're primed to do so. So that leads us to student belonging and empowerment. Go ahead.
When you want them to join a sport club, you're asking for a lot of money. Because, like, I know for my sport, cheer, like, it's $120 just for a pair of shoes. And you have backpacks, uniforms, like, it's a lot of things that go into sports. So you're asking a lot of, like, a student, especially if they're low income, to join a sport like that. So many of them don't.
Yeah, that's just cheerleading, and cheerleading is very expensive. She was very accurate there. So students highlighted the crucial role of clubs and sports in fostering a sense of belonging. One of the most fun things that we see in our district when you go to, I think Washington presented last week, the house system, the space where scholars belong, right? They're part of something. If we remember back in the day, back about 7 years ago when Live, Learn, and Play was in place, where scholars were encouraged to actively participate for 60 minutes and get out and move and be active, mental health was at a third of where it is today. And data have shown it's continuing to increase because COVID set kids, right? So kids are now not getting in clubs and organizations. They're not participating. That sense of belonging and being a part of a sport is very important, and scholars are faced with the ability not to be able to pay for it. I think that's something our district is doing a great job of. I know Earl's team and they're working on ways that when scholars want to participate, we're finding a way to do that because our scholars have to get back and participate in clubs and events to get a sense of identity, to make sure they have positive inclusiveness. Because I think advocating for those things, better facilities, equipment, that emphasizes that we believe in the scholar and their ability to be well-rounded individuals, healthier individuals, and part of our school community. I probably wouldn't be standing here before you today if it wasn't for sports. For a coach that took out and said, hey, look, I'm going to buy your cleats for you. I'm going to get you on that field, and you're going to play football. I would not be here today. So if we eliminate those clubs because a scholar cannot pay for it, we're not going to have scholars standing here today. So that's something we have to challenge ourselves to look, and I think we're doing a great job of that. Another concern was voiced by scholars is insufficient funding. A limited resource that hinders the growth of accessibility of these activities are creating barriers for students who wish to participate but face those challenges. We just talked about that, and I think some of this is awareness. I think our scholars have to be more aware of the type of things that we have because I know that we are trying to address this. I know that was one of Dr. Jarrett's emphasis of making sure that when it's trips and things that we are taking care of that and various things are in place for our scholars to participate. I just think they needed to be more aware. So we didn't get into the why behind this. We did just do more listening, but I think making scholars aware of the opportunities that are afforded to them is very important. And I think this one was very important because it talked about the scholar being at the table to make the decisions with us and us not flushing it down to them. Students express the need for involvement, empowerment. Every school that I was going in, I heard the same thing, and it was a little frustrating. I heard we have great rules. Now, when you create a rule, you usually create that in a silo, right? You didn't create that with a collaboration. You create a rule usually with a smaller subset, right? When you create expectations and norms, you do it with a community. It's harder for scholars to break expectations because they created them with us. It's easy to break a rule because it was not created with them. When you put the scholar in positions to lead the schools thrive. And the scholars want the challenge. They said, put us in charge. Give us opportunities. Let us be a part of the process. Engage us in the decision making. Let us contribute. Let us take ownership and pride in our school community, and we will show up and show out. And that is very relevant because there's many spaces our scholars get to that we can't. You want to know where a scholar is missing? You ask another scholar. These kids I was looking for, I asked other scholars. You want to know how to resolve the social, you ask other scholars. So I challenged us at the beginning to be more scholar experts than content experts. We have to do it in collaborations. If we're not experts in understanding scholars, we can't flush out anything because imagine something with me. If scholars are feeling this and they're usually the last to get it, what about those other layers of stakeholders before it gets to the scholar, right? And I think that's why we are challenged with listening to all these various stakeholders so we can make sure when it gets down to the scholar, they're included and they're empowered. Scholars want to be involved. They don't want to be told what to do anymore. They want to be collaborated with on what to do. And we have to create those leadership opportunities for our scholars and show that we value their voice. And I think RPS is doing something I've not seen done anywhere. We're taking the time to do that. It would be hard-pressed to find another district that's taking that time to listen to every stakeholder and take our time and do it intentionally. But the only problem with listening is listening and not acting. You'd rather not listen at all than you listen and not act. So when we leave here, I want to make sure the two things that we take away, our planning has to be inclusive, and we have to become scholar content experts. Next slide. Navigating the new and evolving digital frontier. Now, before I play this one, I will tell you, you're going to hear a lot more about this because the teachers listening session was heavily weighted about the technology use and what is going on with technology and what technology is doing to the minds of our scholars. Play the video.
All we do is pull out our Chromebooks in every class, They try to block games and stuff like that, but that doesn't help anything at all because people just look at their screen, pull out their phone in front of the screen so you won't know they're on their phone. You know, that's how people do it for real. So, like, getting back into paper and pencil will structurally, like, help you learn.
That one almost made me fall out of my chair. Because as I was listening to scholars in my leadership programs try to spell, they didn't need that ability. It's been taken away. Everything is auto text. So try to spell with a scholar now, right? Think about it. Everything they do is auto text for them. You auto on a Chromebook. Everything is auto. And the scholars had to make me aware, hey, Dr. Reed, have you looked at the data? They asked me, have you looked and saw that is mentally destroying us to sit in front of a Chromebook all day long? There's no data that shows that is helping us, that is hurting us. And everybody does not learn like that. So pull out some, she said, pull out some paper and pencil again. That old school stuff still works. The way students absorb information due to technology is different than past generations. Students question the current landscape. It's overwhelming with screen time. That screen time has been attached to a lot of mental health. It's been attached to headaches. It's been attached to trauma. It's the reason scholars are not sleeping at night. And there's a lot of other studies that go along with that. Our students being overwhelmed with screen time. When we're looking at what we do when our days come up, you know, throwing more of a screen at a scholar, is that the solution? Now, technology is not going away. But the scholars did understand there needs to be a balance. We cannot spend a whole day sitting on a Chromebook and think that's authentic learning. Next slide. Students acknowledge the influence of social media in their lives. They express a desire for the district to actively engage in the same social media spaces, fostering a more connected and communicating relationship between students and the education community. How can we even the playing field and engage with students on social media platform? What is our strategy and approach to actively participate in the same social media spaces that students inhabit? And I think that's important, because if you want to understand what scholars are doing, you got to kind of walk the walk with them. And one of the toughest things to do is make time to walk that walk. And as Dr. Jared has challenged me, one of the things that I was so fortunate to be is he allows you to go out and experience it. I thought I would have to just sit back and sit here. But Dr. Jared said, no, you get out there and you need to listen to every stakeholder. You need to experience it. You need to make sure you bring back authentic voice. Brother Earl's team, Brother James, you all have done a phenomenal job of making sure we capture the voice. I think the most important thing that we can do is show the scholars that we heard them. They're going to watch this. They're going to make sure that we didn't just waste their time and just do another spill of sessions for them with no outcomes. Next slide. As artificial intelligence increases, the lives of our scholars are also changing. Artificial intelligence is something else. I was sitting in a room with Earl's team. They're very innovative. They were making rap songs with Drake, 50 Cent, and all the rappers, and I thought it was the real rappers, but it was not. They were creating papers. They were doing all kind of things I couldn't believe. They said, make a rap song about RPS. I'm not going to tell you what the rap song said, but it did it. And I was blown away. And I said, wow, what is going on? How does it do it? And they were explaining to me artificial intelligence and how it's changing everything they're doing. And it can be fun, but it can also be daunting if you don't know how to navigate that space. So we're faced with something very innovative. Everything after COVID is innovative. It's not the standard traditional thing that we've saw before. And our scholars are challenging us, hey, let's look at this, because they showed not getting away from it. Because according to AI, everybody can be a rapper now. Next slide. So how do we take action? I think we've been clear about how we take action. We have to continue to be scholar advocates and scholar content experts. It's very easy to be a content expert in your own right, because according to yourself, you are the greatest thing to yourself. But one of the funniest things is when you put a survey in a teacher's classroom and you give it to the scholars and tell the scholar to take a survey on what they are experiencing. The perception of what you thought you were delivering is not always what you're delivering. We have to be okay with not being prideful about what we've done and walk the walk with our scholars to what we can do together. In our listening sessions, one of the things that is continuously coming up, whether it's the scholars, whether it's any other stakeholders, is trust. And so we agree, hey, look, behind this line is no trust. After all these listening sessions, let's find the big rocks in every area that we can trust each other together and take steps together. Because if we continue to call plays that we don't all run 100% authentically, we're never going to get to the place. And what's going to get left behind is scary. It's our scholars, it's society, it's our future, because everything we do in society is flushed through education. So you all have a high-stake role, not only in your position, but in saving lives of scholars. They have the tools to save their self. They have the tools to be innovative, but we have to take the time to listen and act on what we're hearing. We are very intentional that we listen to every stakeholder and we find trust and we move forward. We just got through a very innovative listening session with all our teachers. They came out and they had some really great conversations. We have the 5th grade scholars and high school scholars coming in person. We're going to do our listening and action session with our principals and assistant principals in March. We're going to get our counselors and social workers in April. We're going to take our time to make sure that we do these listening sessions and we listen attentively to act. And I'm really thankful to be in RPS. because we don't give ourselves a lot of credit. You are not going to find a lot of districts that are taking their time to intentionally do this. Now, the next step for us is to intentionally do this and plan around this. And I was quiet, but if we already planned our PD before this was done, we got to pause a little bit. This has to be included. Our scholars want this to be included. And if we did all this work to listen, we need to do all our action steps of planning around what they're saying. Because if you ignore our scholars, we are no longer a service community. We're becoming a dictatorship, and we're flushing things down to scholars that they don't really need, and they're going to continue to reject it, and we're going to continue to say why to our data. Any questions?
Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
I would just like to say this was a very eye-opening presentation, and I appreciate your team, Dr. Reed, and all the others that were a part of it, concentrating on the importance of what the scholars are saying and what their needs are. I don't really have any questions. I just had that comment. I want to thank you guys for that. And also, just to reiterate how we need to listen actively, Mr. Pearson, about, when our students are interacting and talking with them. I did find the social media thing that you mentioned. I forget what slide it was on, about how the students want to interact with the district, social media. I think that is something that I would never thought of. And because when you said it, I was like, oh, we got to keep that separate. But as you went on and I thought about it, I think that's a very fabulous idea, and I'm looking forward to being a part of whatever assistance that's needed in making sure that we're listening to our students. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So what I hear tonight still leaves us with challenges. And and the information that I heard is not new information, but I can definitely appreciate the new approach that we're taking to hear our students. So my question is, what are the plans because teachers are overwhelmed as well. And teachers have felt for a very long time that they haven't been heard. So how are we going to support the teachers while we hear and respond to our scholars?
That's a great question, Board President. One of the things that came out with teachers in our listening session that was indirectly it came out is when scholars are having fun, they're having fun. Teachers feed off the scholars having fun because it's a joyful thing to come to work and see your scholar enjoying being there in that classroom. The middle school, the entire middle school, we got on a list and says, hey, what do you all want to do? We want to go somewhere. So they unitedly came up with the idea, hey, look, let's go to Six Flags, and I'll bring that to you all later. It's going to cost a lot of money there possibly, but we'll talk about that one later. But they wanted to do that. And the teachers were behind it. They said, well, if you all do it, we'll go. We want to go. Teachers thrive off being in spaces that are winning. So when we do this right and the scholar is feeling good, the teacher feels good. When you got a group of 20 kids in a class having fun, enjoying themselves, I want to come to work. I want to be there because when I'm not there, I'm missing the story. Education has to become more about the story of coming to school than it is about the data when you leave school. See, when you come to school and it's a story that I'm coming to show up for, you want to be there, I want to be there because I got a kid in my mentoring program, his name Ray Ray. I go over to his school every day because I don't want to miss Ray Ray's story. And that's my guy. We got to get back to those simple things of just having fun. The joy of education is gone. This is becoming so business-oriented that we forgot that this is about having fun. This is becoming scary and not fun. The teachers want to have fun. They want to feel valued. They want to have joy again to come to school and show up. So we need to take time to learn that story of why we're coming here. The data took over the story, and I think that's something we got to be mindful of because we're doing it lately. We're coming back and we're talking about the story again. That presentation last week at Washington was about the story of coming to school. It feels better than just talking about the data. The data will come when we get back to the joy of just being in school. That's what I took away from our teachers.
Well, that's good to know. And on just a note on the Six Flags trip,
Oh, yes, ma'am.
that's a great opportunity to teach them about fundraising and let the district meet them halfway.
Yes, it's a science trip,
If we
Board
come-
President. I forgot to tell you, it's about science. I didn't mention that.
I'm sure we can work it out.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm confident that that will happen.
Yes, ma'am.
And my next question is related to screen time. So, and collectively as a board, we have approved on more than one occasion e-tools, and everything is electronic. So we have kind of forgotten the power of the pencil, and scholars aren't able to always separate the when and the appropriate time. And so as we continue to hear them, we need to make sure that we are offering guidance. Because I find it very interesting, which comes to the point of their learning styles. I heard that as well, that they're overwhelmed with screen time at school, yet outside of school, they double that screen time on social media. So there's another challenge there of being more innovative in helping them learn with the tools that we have as we bring the balance back of education. And in terms of the violence, and now I haven't heard that it's best to have a fight at school. Hadn't heard that one yet. So I get it. I really do. Of course, I'm from a different era, so things are very different now. Do we foresee going back to hall monitors? Once upon a time, there were hall monitors, and I think that they could be utilized in a different way to remind the students to have a great day, to be that an added support in the school, to offer some guidance, whatever that looked like. That may take, time to work out. But I think some things that we done away with, we could possibly revisit to see how it could support our schools.
I think the scholars mentioned that, Board President, when they talked about the various clubs. They are your hall monitors, essentially. When clubs feel empowered to take on spaces in the schools, we have to know they outnumber us as stakeholders. So they do want that challenge. They want to put the challenge on them, because I think the scholars have ability and bandwidth to be in spaces we can't. We're not going in the bathrooms. They are. They know how to navigate these spaces, and I think that's what this is about, getting them in the spaces, like you said, and putting them back in a position to help us be successful in our schools.
Thank you.
Anyone else? The only thing I'll say is it just amazes me how wise our scholars are and how much they see that we don't see. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Just have a couple more slides. Saturday, January 6th was the 9th annual Rumble in the Rock. This event is for all RPS 205 varsity basketball teams to come and showcase their skills alongside the talented RVC men's and women's teams. Thank you to RPS and RVC for all of the support and hard work putting this event on for our athletes and scholars. Also, big thanks to Damo Media for the awesome photos taken at this event. We finish our deck with the board calendar, reminding board members of the many opportunities available to interact with our students, families, and community each month. Please check your calendar on a regular basis for the most up-to-date information. And now if any board members have anything they'd like to share regarding any school events or interactions you've had in the past month. Ms. McCall?
I just would like to comment on my interactions. So I've been attending a lot of middle school volleyball games these past several weeks. And I'm learning a lot of cheers. So most nights I'm leaving the event a little hoarse. So I've attended a lot of the school volleyball games, and it's just amazing the camaraderie we have with our students, and the importance, like Dr. Reed mentioned earlier, about participating in sports and being a part of a team. Let's see what else I saw. And I think that was it for the last couple of weeks.
Anyone else? Ms. Bennett?
Okay, my reflections are more about electronic interaction, so not in person, but this past month I've noticed a big increase in students emailing me, teachers emailing me, community members emailing me. Some of it has been really good stuff, some of it's been problem solving stuff, but I've just really enjoyed people feeling comfortable enough to reaching out, staff responding sometimes within the hour with an actual response or action plan. So yeah, that's been really nice to be able to interact with the community. So not necessarily in real life, but yeah, through email. So that's all.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just real quick, on the first slide you had on the newcomer event at East, there was a story on the NPR affiliate WNIJ about that, so if anybody wanted to check that out, that was a good story on that, so it's on their website.
Great. Anyone else? That concludes our report.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford. That was an excellent presentation and report out. Ms. Haley will now lead the Performance and Monitoring Committee portion of the meeting. Ms. Haley?
Okay, tonight we have 2 items for discussion. First, Ms. Jennifer Lawrence will provide a brief update on the status of the district's focus on prevention of teen dating violence. Then we will update the board on our performance monitoring calendar after your feedback during our December retreat. First, Ms. Lawrence will update us on the current state of Teen Violence Committee.
Good evening. I don't have great slides like Dr. Reed does. But we did spend some time today discussing student voice, so I just want to make sure that you all know that that is part of our conversation. We've had 2 meetings. The second one was today. We got quite a bit done in terms of putting a structure around our teen dating violence program that we're building out. There's about 9 to 12 people that have been at the last 2 meetings. Our next meeting is next week, so we're trying to rapidly move forward to where we can get to a point where we are building some guardrails around some of the services and the things that we're going to be providing. Specifically, we're looking at kind of a mission. That's the history of teen dating violence. What is it not? Some statistics with United States statistics and local and regional statistics. And then we're looking at a model school policy, and that includes our curriculum side of teen dating violence and how we're going to deliver that. And then we have kind of an appendix and resources that we've discussed. So if there's any questions, I know it's not a lot. I do plan on having some slides, not today, but the next time around, to show you some of the work that we're doing. I'm really excited about the group, and we've gotten a long way in 2 very short meetings.
Thank you, board members. Are there any questions?
Ms. Bennett, light is on.
I just have a comment. I got to attend the meeting earlier today, and as Ms. Lawrence said, the amount of work that has been done in 2 meetings is so impressive. But I think one of the really good parts about it so far too is the training piece. So the education of students, or educating students, educating different individuals that work inside the buildings, educating families, the resource component, that there's so many good things going into the actual policy, the procedure, the response, but really just the education piece and making sure student voice is included to ask them how they want the information received. So not grown-ups making the determination for them, but including them. in the process, and having community experts, having different people from all levels, all grade levels, all areas, like the group of people, it's just so perfectly selected. So I'm just really excited about the progress.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Next, we will move on to discussion regarding the board calendar. Are we able to bring this up? I'm not sure. Okay. So board members were given the opportunity to determine the frequency at which the board would receive reports during the year. So we reviewed our old reporting calendar, and what you see in front of you is what we have come up with for this upcoming year as far as reporting on different aspects of the school district. So as you start to look at the calendar, I don't have a comparison of the old calendar, but you will see that the superintendent update occurs monthly. You'll also see that ARP-ESSER will be reported on biannually. This it's going to be in June, July, and also in January. So that was decided by board feedback. You'll also see with the on-track discipline attendance reports, those will occur in November, February, April, and June. You'll also see in February, we'll have a report on EIA success and trends. You'll also notice that our Tier 3A ROI reports will have a preview in September and then also follow up again in March. We will have our SIP updates in August, February, and June, so 3 times a year. We'll have an annual early childhood report that will occur in May. And we'll get an update on our school budget in both October and in April. And as always, the Student Code of Conduct will be reviewed annually, and that will happen in March. Are there any questions or feedback regarding the board calendar?
I was just going to add, Ms. Haley, that as we discussed those reporting times, that was based on our retreat, the feedback we got at our retreat in December, just to clarify where those came from. And you recall, we went through all of the information that we wanted to get from the administration and when we wanted to get that, and sorted through that. And we had suggestions from a continuum of we don't need to know about that to we want to hear about it every meeting. And so Ms. Haley and I met and came up with a consensus on when we thought it was appropriate to hear those various reports. So, and that's what that new calendar shows. So I just wanted to kind of add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to make sure that while we have a schedule that we'll follow on when the reports are, when certain items will be reported out, that there's still opportunity to report as needed. So, if there's a question or need more information or a board member request, that it will be adjusted at that time, correct?
Absolutely. So nothing is really always never in stone. So we will receive those reports as needed.
Thank you.
So for example, the things that are listed for February are for next February?
Yes.
Okay. So starting in March, because I know we've talked about Student Code of Conduct being reviewed, March is this March and April going forward, right? Like, is this starting effective now? That's a probably better way to phrase my question. Now is in not the month of February, but now is in the month of March.
When is the student code of conduct plan to be reviewed?
Yeah, it is in March,
It's in
but
March, right?
I'm trying to figure out, because like a lot of the things that you have on the month of February, I would really like to have information on sooner than June, or I guess some of it is April, but so that, I guess the timing is all I'm trying to understand. That's all.
I intend to be able to provide any of the information for the on-track discipline attendance piece of it in the month of February. So any of the metrics that we're looking at on a weekly basis as cabinet and as principals, freshmen on track, grad rate, in school, out of school suspensions, we'll have our first weekly board update for you in the month of February. We're just waiting for all the grades to be finalized from first semester.
So how will the weekly newsletter, how will that would be delivered to us? Email or at a meeting?
That's what we already did.
Oh, okay. It's listed separately. I thought it was something else. Okay, thank you.
Just for clarity, the superintendent update, it happens in the board meeting.
Sorry, I said the superintendent's update that happens at the board meeting is separate than the newsletter, which is also called Super's Update, which makes it a little confusing. So maybe where it says weekly newsletter, could we do like, I don't know, I guess we'll remember. Never mind, disregard.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Now, our last item tonight is to preview the consent agenda. Are there any comments or questions regarding the items on the consent agenda?
I have a quick question. On 7J, it says advertising services. What exactly is that? Does someone know?
Ms. Stanford, I believe that is the RFP for the transportation. We are working with Mr. Pearson in the communications department on trying to find ways and opportunities to expand our message and need for bus drivers. We've tried a lot of different things, and this is our next effort on that path.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a general question, because I see that there is on O, Amplify Boost Reading on behalf of Conklin. When will we get an overall update on the International Baccalaureate program at Conklin?
I believe I provided one in the written board update. Would you like me to have something, perhaps a board presentation?
Correct. Yeah, I did see that. I would like a more formal update and presentation, since it was originally presented in a presentation.
I'm sure IB would be thrilled. Yeah, Dr. Gallagher can reach out to Principal Brenner and the team, and we can try to find a time in the next few board meetings to invite them to update us on their progress formally.
Very good. Thank you.
So if there are no more questions or comments, this concludes the work of the Performance and Monitoring Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Ms. McCall will now lead the Planning and Development Committee portion of the meeting. Mrs. McCall.
Good evening. For Planning and Development Committee, we have 4 items. We're going to start with item A, Embrace Digital Special Education Records Platform. So special education has utilized the PowerSchool software platform for the past 6 years. There was a need to search for a more robust product to fulfill the needs of our students and the department. Embrace is a user-friendly platform with a focus on compliance. Embrace will aid the department in assessing state measurements that include the requirements to complete full individualized evaluations within 60 school days, as well as identifying the percentage of IEP annual reviews held by the annual due date. The new platform will allow us to examine the progress students with disabilities are making toward completing their individualized education program goals. Embrace has a multitude of reports that can be generated for progress monitoring. Are there any questions regarding the Embrace Digital Special Service Records platform? Seeing none, this will be brought forward to the February 2024 board meeting for approval. The next item B, 8B, 2025 budget request, human resource and health insurance and equity. I will turn the floor over to Matt Zedeker, Chief Human Resource Officer, to present the FY25 budget request for human resources and health insurance. Dr. Anthony Reed will then present the FY25 budget request for the equity department. Okay, Mr. Zedeker.
Just getting the clicker. Okay, we are set. Good evening. I am here to present the preliminary budget for human resources. As we look at human resources in terms of the organizational chart, we have our core human resources, talent development, allocations, compliance, benefits, and accountability that all feed into the HR department. Just going through a couple of these org charts so you can see what makes up what we call our core HR, which would be our talent acquisition teams as well as our HR generalists. Allocation and compliance. Talent development team, which would also include our teacher mentors. And then the top of this screen is our benefits team. And then the bottom is our accountability team. So just some highlights and major tasks from kind of each department within HR. As we look at talent acquisition, this department oversees our postings and placements of all positions, job offers to new employees. They conduct our new hire appointments, and then they also are responsible for the communication flow with buildings on new hires and that process and where those employees are at in that process. Talent development does our onboarding, and they've really updated that to a virtual platform to make sure that we are engaging all of our new employees. They create training videos with various departments. They create the 205 pathways for professional learning that we create right here in-house. And then they also oversee our PAR program, which is our teacher support along with new teacher mentoring. Accountability, so PDSA process, our AROI, a system-wide framework, our school scorecard, and then all of our surveys run through the accountability team. And then benefits, our health and dental, wellness, retirees, our leave of absence, worker comp, and then our long-term, short-term disability, as well as our 457 and 403B investments. So that all runs through our benefits team. So on this screen, this is a combination of the 3 different budgets that we have, so that the numbers are larger, and I'll break down each budget in further slides. But you can see overall as a complete HR department, we are going to be up a little over $530,000, with a vast majority of that being benefits and salaries as we look at FY25. You will see through the various slides that are coming, we are saving quite a bit of money, a little over $80,000 on purchase services as we looked at contracts and trimming any contracts that weren't necessary. So this slide is for what we would call the core HR department. You can see the salary and benefits did go up a little over $145,000. Purchase services, and you'll see in contracts, so I'll talk about it now, a majority of that $54,000 in savings is projected based off a policy that the board will review tonight in terms of pre-screen drugs for our pre-screening for pre-employment. If we act on that policy change, that will save us quite a bit of money in a current contract that we have. So that's where you'll see a lot of those potential savings. So as we look at the contracts within HR, again, I referenced that physician immediate care where you're seeing a large decrease there. We were able also to decrease with our firm systems for fingerprinting. And then the other large chunk that you see is under Power School. Our LMS, which is Schoology, we've changed the way that we have done our licenses with Schoology and really only focused on adult learning and no student learning within that LMS. The students use Google Classroom, and so we were able to trim quite a bit of money off of that contract by adjusting the number of licenses that are available for that LMS. So from a contract perspective, we're saving just a little over $71,000. So then we move into talent development. Talent development is overall increasing a little over $393,000, but you can see that really is all about salaries and benefits for next year. As we take a look, the reason for the large increase in salaries and benefits is that our teacher mentors used to be funded through Title II, a grant, and so we've moved those teacher mentors into our local dollars, so our Fund 10 as a service that we provide to teachers, and so that's why you see the large increase year over year in those salaries and benefits. But we were able to trim a little bit in purchase services as well as other miscellaneous, pardon me. As we look at contracts, the reason that these have stayed flat in terms of facility rental or our trainers and consultants, these are kind of dollars that are budgeted for what ifs. If things come up throughout the course of the year with other departments in terms of needs for professional learning, we have kept some money aside to support departments throughout the course of the year if they need that. But you can see that it remains flat from year to year. As we move into accountability, purchase services is going down and supplies going up. The major increase in supplies is how we work with College Board and our PSAT. So we work through that as a per test invoice. We've also included fall PSAT as well as spring, so that's why we're seeing an increase in our supplies for that line. So here you can see the decrease in district management group. Christina Miller was new to the accountability team last year, and we procured $10,000 for direct work with DMG, who helps us with our AROI and PDSA. We will not need that for FY25. And then 5-Site Analytics is a membership that we don't need for next year as well, so you see a decrease there. So in contracts out of accountability, we are saving just roughly over $10,000. So really, in turn, return on investment from an HR lens, we're continuing to take a look at the recruitment and retention of qualified staff. We want to continue to professionally develop our staff, work with other departments to maintain some effective internal controls, gain efficiencies where we can, and make sure that we are implementing and monitoring district accountability initiatives. Before I move into the health insurance fund, are there any questions on those department budgets?
I'm sorry, Mr. Getzlediger, I do have a question.
Yes.
And it was just the fact that I was trying to catch up.
Yes.
The physician's immediate care that went down $20,000.
Yep.
Why was that again?
Yeah, so that's our forecast. On tonight's agenda, the board will see a change in our board policy for pre-employment drug screening and eliminating those for positions where we can, and only keeping pre-employment drug screens for positions that are mandatory, such as bus drivers and others under Department of Transportation regulations. And so that would reduce the contract or the amount that we would need with physicians immediate care. We would need to budget some money for reasonable suspicions or things that we would still need to use them for, but that would give us quite a bit of savings in terms of that service from PIC.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? Mrs. Stanford.
On the talent development budget, the salaries are going up. You said that's because we have a group of employees no longer being paid by a grant.
Correct.
Why is that?
So out of Title II, because the state has mandated new teacher mentoring, federal grants are used to supplement instead of supplant positions and services that districts are required to provide. So we needed to move those 3 teacher mentors from that funding stream to the local funding stream.
So the grant would no longer apply to them?
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Madam President.
Thank you. I just have a general question. My mind goes back to when the board supported increased staff regarding the electronic piece of insurance related to claims. Do you have any information on that? If not, we can.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand your question.
So I'll send you an email.
Yeah, okay, great.
Because they were connecting or monitoring the claims like on a spreadsheet, and it was going to electronic type of format to monitor the claims. But I can.
Yeah, if you shoot me an email, I'd be
shoot you an
happy
email.
to engage with that.
I think it was about cross-referencing dependents. So when the software would help like notifying individuals when they had a dependent, like
Okay,
26.
are we talking about the dependent audit that we just finished executing?
That was one component, but this goes back before your time, Mrs. Bennett. So I'll give you that information. But since we're on the subject of the dependent, how's that working?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, we wrap up with that on February 8th. That's the very last date that people can submit. I will have final numbers that I can report out to the board in the weekly update. Just high level, we have over 90% of the employees had already submitted the necessary documentation, so we were looking pretty good in terms of that. We won't know kind of a estimated kind of cost-saving measure until I get the final report, but that's something certainly I'll be sharing with the board.
Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Just following up on Ms. Stanford's question. So is the grant, are we not getting the grant money at all anymore, or is it going to be used for some?
No, we still get the grant, but the dollars that we would use now, there's we probably will get some reduced funds just off of the way the federal dollars are working anyway. But we still get Title II. It's still used in our district for various sources. We'll be shifting that money to other supplemental either positions or activities.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Zedeker, and I welcome.
Well, I have to go over the health insurance fund.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
I'm the longest budget presentation. Don't worry. I have lots of
well, you know what?
So.
You were supposed to stop at the end.
Oh, sorry.
And then I would ask the question.
I threw you off. So my apologies. That is my apologies.
Go ahead.
So now we shift into the health insurance fund, which we reference as Fund 11. If you ever hear Fund 11, this is all essentially contracts as we take a look at our health insurance and others. So as we work with Dr. Brown and team and taking a look at projections, that's what's tough about Fund 11 because a lot of it is projections and where we are underwriters with Gallagher as they present information to us. But right now from a Fund 11 perspective, we're looking at a reduced cost in our medical insurance administration. We're seeing a slight decrease or predicting a slight decrease in terms of a budget for our medical and dental claims. And then we are looking at a significant decrease overall with our pharmacy, both claims and administration, reduced by about 1.8 million. We are going up slightly with our insurance, our stop loss. That was something that just went through board, but stop loss was something that had a large increase to it due to inflation and some of our history with claims over the last couple of years. But overall, we're looking at about a $3.4 million savings for FY25 from FY24. And again, and I'll have some slides right after this that show kind of year over year. But again, as a benefits team, we're looking at trying to mitigate healthcare costs by still providing quality benefits, providing customer service to all employees, but certainly our retirees as they exit our organization, and then continue to support a wellness-conscious employees. So the following slides are cost and initiative summaries. We're always in the lag with our health insurance because the way our fiscal year runs. And so we're not able to report yet on fiscal year 24 because it doesn't end until June 30th, 2024. So you'll see that the years that we cover in this presentation will stop at FY23. But you can see the year over year per employee per year cost as we look at our medical expenses stayed fairly flat, and then we saw that large increase from FY21 to FY22, and then FY23 headed back down a little bit. Overall, since 2017, we have averaged approximately 3.2% increase on our medical costs. This slide is just a visual of what that represents. I think it's nice to see where the orange line is the trend that Gallagher gives us in terms of their underwriting and medical costs over that same period of time. You can see that, again, that large increase in 22 where we closed the gap, but seeing us go back down in 23. And so the work that our benefits team is doing in collaboration with Dr. Brown's team in terms of mitigating costs and looking at cost-saving measures, hopefully we'll continue to see that trend go down. So just some items of note. We did see the number of claims that were over 50,000 decrease from the year prior by a little over 16%. Total dollars paid also decreased. The one thing we are taking a look at and want to continue to examine, pharmacy claims did increase by just under 17% compared to the year prior. And so we're looking at a potential trend of somewhere between 8 and 9% as we project out next year. But as we look at continuing with the end of 24 and looking into 25, high-cost medications are the ones that we're really going to be focusing in on from pharmacy. Those are the ones that are causing our increase. So I know working with Dr. Brown and Tanel Barnes, our benefits director, that will be something that they continue to collaborate on in terms of ways to mitigate some of those costs. We did sign a new RX contract with Express Scripts. In that contract, we are expecting to see better pricing and also larger rebates as we go through FY24 and then into FY25. So just some control programs that we have in place. We continue with our wellness initiatives. In FY21, we received over $2.1 million in rebates, so we're continuing to expect that to rise from Express Scripts. And then our employee health centers. So this is the first year that we've launched that. We've seen some fairly decent numbers, but working with Dr. Brown and his experience with health clinics over in Belvedere, we'll really start to see some significant cost savings in year 2 as we're up and running and people are more used to heading to our centers. And so we're excited to see how that return on investment looks in FY25. So with that, we'll take any questions around benefits or Fund 11.
Mr. Stanford?
I'm just curious, how exactly are our insurance administration and claims going down $3.4 million?
Yeah. Yep. So we're looking at some of the trend and lag reports that we have as we look at budget. We're seeing some of the high claimants coming down. And then from an Express Scripts or a farm, we are looking at those high cost medications. But with the new contract and the expected discounts that we should be receiving on other drugs and medications, as well as the rebates we're expecting to receive, we think that's going to offset what that potential inflation might look like for FY25. This is going to be a moving target. This is something that Dr. Brown and I will continue to take a look at as we continue to get reports through the rest of this year as we finalize our budget. These are projections that were based off of December, and so there's a lot of movement that may happen over the next 3 to 4 months.
Any other questions? Okay, now thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Reed. That's not the right one. Please bear with us while we get to the correct. So while this is happening, everyone just look around away from your screen for 10 seconds to reduce some of the screen time.
Absolutely.
The previous presentation, the last 8 slides of it were Dr. Reed's. Oh, I'm so sorry. No problem.
It's the second time I thought I got replaced. She's called on Anthony, and then my board presentation is gone. I'm in trouble up here. Yeah, that's okay. I'm still here.
Antoine. I'm sorry. Dr.
Okay.
Antoine Reed.
No, I'm here.
I took my eyes away from the screen and
It's okay. That's okay.
goofed. No, my brother's name is Anthony, so it's always the first to say.
It's all the same thing.
No, it's not. Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Right. So this is the Equity Department, our preliminary budget for FY25. Next slide. Oh, we got the clicker. Here we go. So this is our department. As you can see, everything has stayed the same. We've added 2 new positions, the Equity and Opportunity Manager and the Student Belonging and Attendance Manager. We'll also be partnering with Transportation to partner for transportation liaisons. The Equity Department highlights on a weekly basis, we're looking at policies and board docs to review them with the equity lens, staff belonging and retention, scholar attendance and belonging, family and community partnerships, CPI, equity training, coaching, and supports through our Tier 1 toolkit. Our recruitment highlights, we shared a little bit last week, but we focus on the university and HBCU partnerships, educational career fairs, hiring incentives, clinicals and student teaching, teacher pathway programs. So our equity budget, we're going to see an increase in salaries and benefits because we have added the 2 new positions. Purchases and services will drop because of CPI, which you'll see on the next slide. The second year CPI is not as much as the first year. Our supplies will increase a little bit because of the new positions and some of the things that we will need there. And so our total budget, you'll see a drop of $130,000, and that is mostly because of CPI, which you'll see on the next slide. So CPI is where you'll see the variance. Everything else is pretty much staying the same in our department. These last 2, Northern Illinois, they are both grant funded. And our return on investment is that we provide systems of supports for our schools, district-wide affinity spaces and listening sessions, increase and sustainable teacher pathways and pipelines, and policy reviews through an equity lens, and a district-wide focus on attendance and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Dr. Reed?
Yes, I have a question.
Madam President.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you foresee increasing your team, you still look a little short.
So we will be increasing right now, and then I think after that increase, I know Dr. Jarrett talked about looking down the road after we see how these first two positions play, because we've added the attendance, and that is a really robust role that we have to take our time and play out before we continue to layer on. So we want to make sure the attendance part of our team is done the correct way before we look at any other positions.
Thank you.
Mrs. Haley?
I'm looking at the chart where you have the staff, the transportation liaisons. Is that it says open? What's that role? Can you explain that role a little bit?
Yeah, so with our mobility rate, we recognize there's certain routes require an extra support to make sure we keep up with the scholar, communicate back with the school. So this liaison role will be very important in supporting attendance as they can communicate with the schools, some incentives, some positive rewards around what scholars are doing on the bus. And sometimes when your bus driver is not on that bus, it's worse than having a substitute teacher. The scholars feel not safe. So that person will be on some of our routes that require a little more support and a little more help as it relates to mobility rate, and create some incentives and some enthusiasm, because that's the first person our scholars usually see as that bus person. So we want to make sure we add some support on some of our routes.
Okay, and I probably asked this before, and I don't know if this is your bucket. When we consider students and attendance, sometimes those are family issues. I know there is some outreach to the family right now. Is that your bucket?
That is absolutely something that we have a WBS plan for, that Dr. Jarrett and our entire cabinet has various hands in, but that is a key proponent of it, the community outreach portion of our attendance plan. So that is that community partnership that we're working on, and we've collaborated in some spaces. We've actually heard about different sidewalks are being added because of some of the things that we're doing in some of our planning in some of our areas. So that is definitely a part of what we're working on, but I think that's a cabinet initiative that we're looking at attendance, but we're doing it through the lens of belonging, which is why that community partnership is very important.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Reed.
Thank you.
Item C, the strategic plan presentation. Matthew Zedekers, Chief Human Resource Officer, will present the strategic plan presentation.
Okay, I'm back, and the purpose of this presentation is just to start a conversation and the board to be exposed to some different options as we think about the future in strategic planning. Our strategic plan is the guide for all of our work. So it has our vision, our mission, our equity imperative, universal goals, values, and standards. I think a lot of you recognize this graphic, and as you can see at the top, it is due to expire in 2024. And so working with Dr. Jarrett, we thought it would be a nice proactive measure just to kind of put some thoughts and ideas and options in front of the board that then can be discussed further in the planning committee, as this would fall under the planning committee as it would be new and something that would come forward. And so the expectation is certainly not for any decisions tonight, but just for an opportunity board to see various options. So some things to consider as we present the various options to the board are some of the timelines and major projects that we'll be embarking on not only this year but over the next couple of years that may impact how the board wants to move forward in the future with strategic planning. Those being the facilities master plan. We're currently updating the system-wide framework to what we call version 2.0. That is moving from more of an implementation system-wide framework to much more rigorous in terms of the expectations. And the board will get an update when we are closer to refining that. Talking about the amended superintendent contract with the goals, the universal goals extended through 2026, and then also school board elections. And so these are just for board considerations. You will see three options. All of the options from a visual standpoint will look the same. The one change will be where the beginning of the strategic planning process would start and when the implementation of that new strategic plan would occur. So in option one, again, as we reference some of the major projects and initiatives that the district will be embarking on over the next couple of years, again, you can see a revised system-wide framework that will get launched in the fall of 2024. The plan is to have that new system-wide framework work through the end of June 2027. Our facility master plan really will just get started in the spring of 25 and run through 2030 at this time. Some board elections will occur in the spring of 25, and then also we'll have REA negotiations coming up in the spring of 25 as well. The green bar represents the amended superintendent contract with the extended universal goals that run through 2026. And so in this option, you see the board could decide to embark on a full strategic planning process that would begin in the fall of 26 and would occur through the 26-27 school year with the implementation of the new strategic plan in the fall of 27. The pros or the advantages to moving through this option is that the board would have as much student data as possible to consider as they think about the new goals or the new direction that they would like the district to take. Our 5-year facility master plan will be well on its way, and we'll have an idea of what our classrooms look like and our facility upgrades that could be incorporated into a strategic plan, and that the end of the system-wide framework would be in 27 as well. So there would be some joint planning and overlapping as we take a look at teaching and learning in conjunction with that strategic plan. As we look at option two, again, all the same major events and tasks. The difference here is that the full strategic planning would begin in the 25-26 school year with the implementation of a new strategic plan in the 26-27 school year. Again, there are some advantages of starting a year later. Again, we'd have a little bit more student data, and our facilities master plan will have kicked off. Some of the negatives or potential hurdles here is that we wouldn't have a full slate of student data to consider as we think about strategic planning. Our system-wide framework would still be in year 2. And so we wouldn't be yet ready to take a look at revisions on the success of that system-wide framework as it pertains to the school scorecard and our state scores. And then there could be an opportunity where we may or may not still be negotiating a contract at that time. So there's some overlapping that could occur with the planning of the new strategic plan. And then the last option would be where, as indicated on our current strategic plan, it expires in 2024. The board could decide to begin this fall to start planning and preparing for a new strategic plan immediately upon the expiration of this one, with that implementation of that new strategic plan in the fall of 25. Certainly then that would, the pro of that would be there would be no gap between the current strategic plan and planning for the new one. But as you can see in terms of the visual, there will be a lot of overlapping with some of those major projects and major events. And the board may not have all of the data that it needs to really work with the superintendent to guide this process. And so just again, to reiterate, this the purpose of this presentation was just to get it out in front of the board so that we can start a conversation that again will probably work through the planning committee, and to have questions and answers and to engage with administration and the superintendent about what the board's wishes would be moving forward on the topic of strategic planning. So with that, I guess I will take any questions that board members have.
Are there any questions? Mr. Carpenter?
Thank you. So you said that the first option would give us the most student data and the second would have less. And so I'm just wondering, is that the student data as to the universal goals or something else?
Yeah, so the universal goals that were extended out, so we would have updated or the most information in terms of graduation rate, freshmen on track, third grade literacy. We would also have the most data from our updated system-wide framework and school scorecard. As we move into kind of the updated version for system-wide framework, we're moving to a much more rigorous approach for schools to meet their standards. And so we would have an opportunity and have more time to reflect on those scores as well as we think about teaching and learning and outcomes as a holistic picture.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Madam President.
So in regards to the strategic plan, are you planning to, how will we combine or implement the presentation that Dr. Reed gave earlier into this strategic plan? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think really in full transparency, the answer to that question is that's really a part of the process of the planning. So when we talk about a full strategic planning year, that would be incorporated into a full strategic plan. Most times boards elect to do an RFP to have an outside consultant to help facilitate that process. So that process could incorporate listening sessions and surveys. There are different ways to tackle strategic planning. And so that would be a decision that the board would work with the superintendent administration on in terms of the approach on what they would like to do to engage in strategic planning. So I know, Dr. Jarrett.
Yeah, if I could just add, listening to student, staff, and community partners like families, the work of listening and then responding is not something we will wait for a strategic planning process. It will certainly inform a formal strategic plan, but the work that we are starting in partnership with the communications team and the DEI team ultimately is work that we will be doing no matter what, and would certainly be informative, but not codependent. We certainly don't want to wait to act on what we're learning from our scholars, from our teachers and staff, or from our families, or from our community members. We want to be able to act on those regularly, and we will be reporting out to the board how that will work through stakeholders committee moving forward. The first step was to give you an example of a report through listening to students and codifying what we learned from our students. But what we'll see moving forward will be kind of a process where issues will be highlighted and directed to content experts to engage in further communication and ultimately some solutions around some of the issues that our groups are raising. So I think you can expect on a very regular cadence of additional listening from different groups, pairing that with some of our formal survey data. For example, we are just starting to get back our staff formal survey data, which we'll be able to partner with our staff listening session. And I think the goal is going to be that in stakeholders, you're going to regularly hear new information about what we're learning by listening, but you're also going to learn how we're applying what we're listening to solutions. And that doesn't mean everything every scholar or staff member tells us will become its own solution, but we will work with the board to set priorities on what we want to act on. So I suspect a follow-up to tonight's presentation will be some conversation with the board about what action steps might look like based on what we learned after you've had some time to absorb it. So that was a long roundabout way to say I see that as an and, not an or. I see that as something that we will be doing immediately, and I think that work will make for a better strategic planning process. Whatever the board decides to do that formal overarching strategic plan, if we are consistently listening to our stakeholders through the stakeholders committee work, we will have a better planning process.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Zediker.
Okay, thank you.
For item D, Forefront Power Community Solar Subscription Agreement, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Michael Phillips, the Chief Operations Officer, to provide an update on the community solar project.
Mike, do you have anyone coming up to join you this evening, or is this just going to be you?
If there's some questions, I have Julia Henry from Forefront Power here if there are questions. I thank Julia for coming from San Francisco, braving the cold weather. So good evening, everybody. I'm excited to provide an update on our community solar project with Forefront Power. Since receiving board approval on an option to lease in June, Forefront has been actively working on various aspects of the project. Firstly, they've successfully obtained all necessary city permits, and they obtained the interconnection agreement with ComEd and are actively working on our engineering aspects of the project. We're now at the point that we need to enter into a subscription agreement with Forefront Power to purchase 40% of the annual production of this solar array. We're estimating that to be 700,000 kilowatt hours. The overall annual production of this solar project will be 1,800,000 kilowatt hours. The remaining 60% will be our community members will have an option to purchase through ComEd and receive renewable energy credits. We will actively work with our communications department and Forefront as we get closer to bringing this system online to advertise that to our community. Whatever's not purchased by our community, ComEd will sell on the open market, and others will be able to obtain those renewable energy credits. But we want to do everything we can to see our community members take advantage of that program. So we'll be actively communicating that as we near operation. I wanted to recap revenue and projected savings over the 20-year period of this contract. As part of the option to lease, we are currently receiving $5,000 annually. We're receiving that in quarterly payments of $1,250. We will continue to see that until Forefront activates the lease, which we are projecting to be in late spring, early summer. Upon execution of the lease, Forefront will pay us $1,500 an acre. They'll be leasing approximately 5 acres. So we'll receive $7,500 our first year of the lease. That will escalate 2% annually going forward. So we are projecting an overall revenue of $196,000 over the 20-year period off the lease. Once the solar field is operational, the district will receive a 15% discount on the price to compare, which is the price we'll purchase power from, which equates to an estimated on-bill savings of approximately $208,000 over the 20-year period. So we're looking at a projected $404,000 of combined revenue and projected savings over this 20-year period. Lastly, I just wanted to, this was a slide that we presented back in June, but wanted to show this again on basically how the site will be laid out. The access road coming off Ogilvy to access the solar field itself. So as I said, we're getting very near time that we'll be constructing this project. I do want to kind of go back, and prior to approving, we did do our due diligence with the city as well as our own mailings to the neighbors surrounding the solar field, just to make sure everybody was aware of what was happening in this area. At the actual zoning, planning, and appeals portion at the city, we had nobody speak out about the project, and I received, or the school district did not receive any questions or concerns from our mailings to our neighbors either. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Madam President.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. So I have expressed my concerns previously regarding the location of this, and thank you for getting the communication. What I've learned in speaking with, and just what I know of some residents in the area, they probably won't have any questions until it goes up. And so they may not express any concerns, of course, until it goes up. And then my phone is going to ring off the hook because they see this ginormous something off of Ogilvy Road, and they will be calling me, of course, because that is my sub-district, and most likely. So well, I understand that we sent mailers out, and as we know, that is not always the best method of, I mean, of course, you've done your due diligence, but in terms of understanding and really making it clear, when we're doing listening sessions, can we, and we are discussing the master's plan and all of that, can we include some details like this and have an additional means of explaining to community members? Because in that area, you have a lot of retired older adults that may not understand what's really going on. So if we could have more avenues of sharing information where it's understandable to the immediate, specifically the immediate neighbors that will be directly impacted or not with the plant being there.
We'll definitely look at ways to incorporate some additional information about this project as well as our behind the meter projects, which will be coming to the board in March with an update on the behind the meter portion of the project. So Board President Pearson, by all means, will look at ways, and I'll talk with Forefront and our communication department if there's other ways we can get out additional information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mrs. Haley?
I'm just looking at the risk scenarios on that last slide, but you can keep this up here. Yeah. When that risk, a couple risk scenarios are discussing the underlying land that Rockford has the potential to sell, where is that on the map? Is that just the front part?
Actually, I'm sorry, I should have. So that is actually, it's the Park District that owns property to the east. So there's a section of property between Lathrop School and the solar array here that the Park District owns.
And so how would that affect the project if they were to sell it? And
it shouldn't impact our project at all. That will be something else I will probably be coming to board with. The Park District is interested in doing an intergovernmental agreement on some property swaps, and so currently working through some scenarios with them before I bring it to board.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it was my understanding that the Park District had property and the city and RPS 205, correct?
So Park District is, like I said, generally to the east. There's an easement that runs along the south side, which would be considered the city, but it's typically a utility easement. But once again, that won't impact the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Phillips. I will now move on to the preview of the consent items for the Planning and Development agenda. Planning and Development Committee. We have one item on there, the DLR Group Professional Service Agreement for the College and Career Education Center Design Services. So our architectural and engineering services are required to provide programming, design, and bidding documents for renovations at the College and Career Education Center. The district's vision is to create a state-of-the-art learning environment for career pathway and advanced placement classes that prepare our students for the challenges of the future. Programming and design would begin in late February. Bidding will take place in October, with construction project to begin projected to begin in November. The building will be open for classes in August of 2025. Are there any questions regarding the DLR Group professional service agreements for the College and Career Education Center design services? Madam President.
Thank you. So I just want to bring a couple of items to the attention of the board. So as we build the agenda, we build it based on the information shared in committees. So if committees don't meet in sufficient enough time before the governance committee, then there's knowledge that I won't have until sometimes the week of a meeting. So I'm asking committee chairs to work with the staff liaisons and how you can meet sooner. And so when we meet, there's information that's not uploaded. Sometimes I find out like the week of or at the meeting. Now the DLR group, I understand, is just for design. I did request information, and of course we're excited about what's to come with the building, but I request information, and if it was sent, it did not come through on the outstanding work orders that we have. And the reason I'm bringing attention to that is so many times we focus on the new, and the older buildings and schools and facilities go lacking. And we don't want to just continue to build the state of the art when there's significant opportunity in the schools where we're servicing students in the now. So is there?
So Ms. Pearson, as we discussed, we have a report centered around our work orders coming to an upcoming weekly superintendent's update. It should be this Friday.
Okay, so it was my understanding that it would be in the update that we recently had on Friday. On last Friday.
Well, I guess I apologize, our discussion that we were going to work on that and get it to the earliest superintendent weekly update we could.
Okay, and what do you think some of the barriers are? What is the delay?
We're working on it. I mean, it'll be ready for this Friday. No delays.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, that completes the report for the Planning and Development Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President McCall. I would now present the agenda items for a governance committee. As part of the governance portion of the agenda, I want to introduce a special guest that I have this evening. So many times we discuss bidding come before us, and I don't know that every board member really understands the entire bidding process and the responsible bidding. So I've invited Mr. Paul Anoli to come, and he's going to present on the responsible bidder ordinances. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam President, for allowing me to be here and presenting to you all. Thank you all on the board for listening and allowing me to be here as well. Just real quick, and I do have copies. I don't know if you guys would like this, but hopefully you can see the slides just fine. And if you'd like copies afterwards, I'd be happy to provide those to you. But just real quick, I want to introduce myself and what Project First Rate is all about, and then I'll get into the meat of the presentation, which is all about responsible bidder ordinances, responsible bidder policies. I'll just call them RBOs for short today. So Project First Rate, we are next slide. Oh, I guess I have the clicker here. Perfect, thank you. We are a nonprofit labor management organization for the construction industry. So really what I get to do is be the community entity, the community-facing, the community-focused organization for our industry and serve in a nonprofit role. My office is right in downtown Rockford, right down the street from here, but we serve about a 9-county area and all the folks that work and do business in that area. Part of my role, I get to go out and work with the schools, whether it's Rockford, Belvedere, all the different schools in our area, to make sure that their students are aware of apprenticeship programs in the building and construction trades. I work with each of the high schools through our Career Expo, going to do school presentations, and other districts as well. So it's a really big joy coming from a working class background to allow people to understand not only what these careers are about, but how you get into them, how they differ. Here's some resources, particularly for people who are underrepresented in our industry still, and that's really meaningful to me. But another part of what I get to do is promote the high road or high standards in our industry and advocate for policies and different things that advance those type of high standards and hold our workers and our businesses, our contractors, accountable to those high standards. So as an extension of that type of work that I get to do in our community, that's why I'm here today to talk about responsible bidder ordinance, basically lay out the basics of them, answer any questions that you may have. So go ahead and get right into it. So a responsible bidder ordinance is essentially a change in procurement policy, one that moves a public body from accepting the lowest bid on taxpayer-funded construction to accepting the lowest responsible bidder, with that definition of what responsible is coming from the policymakers or elected officials of a public body. These standards in a responsible bidder ordinance will be objective and verifiable and relate to the bidder's ability to perform the work being asked of them safely, efficiently, and with workers who have been properly trained in the trade or their craft that they are going to be performing on a job. And just a note on why this is incredibly important in our industry, according to the National Safety Council, with the most recent data that's available from 22, construction saw the highest number of fatalities by the numbers in any industry across the United States. So making sure workers are properly trained, that they're safe, that their employers are doing the right thing is incredibly important for this industry as well as many others. These higher standards for contractors provide public bodies with additional tools and assurances that the public funds they spend on construction go to contractors with proven track records of performing work competently, and that taxpayers won't be on the hook for subpar work or excessive cost overruns. So without clear standards to determine the responsibility of a contractor, what state law gives or defines is that a public body such as this, with some exceptions in other jurisdictions, your responsibility is just to accept the lowest bid. This puts any public body, whether it's the district or others, at risk of choosing contractors lacking formal training for their workers or having previous violations of fraud, worker misclassification, and a whole array of challenges. The provisions and standards that define what makes a bidder responsible must be set by the policymakers of a jurisdiction or a given public body and should reflect their concerns, their values, their priorities. And so that means what one public body does here versus a neighboring public body, those RBOs may have some similarities, but there may be some differences as well. So these type of policy changes, I believe, reflect the values that this the school district and school board hold, as well as we do, and many others in our community. And that means putting taxpayer dollars to their best, most effective use. And in this case, we're talking about additional levels of scrutiny as to who gets the privilege of taking on publicly funded projects on behalf of you all and the taxpayers. I know that you all have made stretching those taxpayer dollars, keeping that levy flat a priority. You communicate that very strongly. I see it out there in the community, and I think this is an extension of those values that you put out constantly. It also requires the highest level of performance, that concept of excellence, from contractors for the schools and all the different facilities and things that we exist in and we walk, come, and go through, whether it's our students, whether it's our educators, our families, each and every day. It also promotes the values of a fair economy, where businesses, especially those working on behalf of the taxpayer or their representatives, have to play by the rules and have the same opportunity and prospects of engaging in work in exchange for those precious taxpayer dollars. Making sure that everyone And additionally, making sure that everyone who wants to build a real career in the trades, in the building and construction trades industry, has a chance to have a real education in this field, a real program where they get a full-on education and not just being trained in a willy-nilly kind of way where they're going to be unsafe on the job, so that they are safe, skilled, and ready to be successful and have a lifelong career in whatever trade or craft they choose. So these are some, just kind of a sample menu, if you will, of the different components that could be considered within a responsible bidder ordinance. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a sampling of some of the most common elements that are in there, in various examples that you can look to in the community in different jurisdictions. One I do want to point out that we believe is core to any good and strong RBO is the fourth point you see there, which is evidence of participation in apprenticeship and training programs. Because in the construction and building trades, the apprenticeship program is the bachelor's degree. There are no four-year university degrees to become a carpenter. There are certainly those degrees if you want to get into management, if you want to work in the office and do estimating, things of that nature. But as a trade worker, as someone actually performing that craft work on the job, these are the bachelor's degrees, generally 4 or 5 year programs. They are highly structured, regulated by the U.S. Department of Labor, and require thousands of hours of classroom and on-the-job education and training. There are also very few licensures requirements for trade workers. I believe in the state of Illinois, the only one that is formally required through the state is plumbing. Some local jurisdictions add additional requirements. But that means if you're hiring, let's say, an electrician or electrical worker, there's no formal state licensure. So having a trades worker who has been through an apprenticeship program or a contractor that has affiliation with an apprenticeship program is the only guarantee that that worker has went through a formal, structured, post-secondary education in that trade. And finally, I just want to give a list of surrounding communities that have adopted these RBOs in varying intensity or those components within them. They're all going to be a little bit different, have their own little flavor. But as you can see, I'm sure you are all familiar with these jurisdictions. We have folks who are nonpartisan leaders and elected officials who have passed this and secured it for many years. We have Republican-led jurisdictions that have passed this and kept it. We also have people, Democratic-led communities and jurisdictions as well. So a ton of local governments in our area have adopted these policies for many years, have kept them on the books because they're effective and provide value to the taxpayer and really protect them as those elected officials and those policymakers. So we see this as a common sense policy. It's a win for the taxpayers. It's a win for public bodies. And it's a win for all those who believe in leveling the playing field for people who want to do business on behalf of the taxpayer and on the taxpayer's dime. So that's my presentation today, but I would be totally open to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Do anyone have any questions? Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Do you have any sample proposals that our district could look at to determine if we want to enact those?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share that. Yep.
Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else? Mr. Noli, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to present. And the email address, you can, perhaps if you're still here after the meeting, you can introduce yourself to Mr. Carpenter and make sure that you forward that information to him and Dr. Jared, and we can just make sure that everyone get the same information.
Very good.
Thank you very much for your time. Okay. I have asked policies 2.150, 2.172, 4.32, 4.62, 4.65, 4.87, 4.152, 4.180, 5.08, 5.25, 5.35, 5.187, 7.55, and 7.355 be placed on the agenda for board review and discussion. So the reason I noticed that some of the policies were adopted in 1997. Some of them was never reviewed. Some were revised and never reviewed. And on an average, 2 to 10, 15 years. And I think it's really important because policies, in my opinion, keeps an organization intact. So those who reviewed, assigned board policies, and we can start with Ms. Stanford and work our way around if you have any comments or report out, or this can just be a review with updates to come. It's nothing that we have to, of course, decide on tonight, but we definitely want to get policies documented as reviewed. Mrs. Stanford.
Okay, so what I did was just a little summary of my 2 policies. I didn't really have anything that I think needed to be changed, but we can go with the summary. So the first one is policy 2.172, use of consultants. Basically what the policy says is that there's 2 ways for a contract for services over $35,000 to be approved by the board. The first way is by being included in a tentative annual budget as part of the budget attachment A, which we saw some of those tonight. Mm-hmm. The second is by being approved individually when it comes to us at a board meeting separately. In order to be part of the budget attachment A, the contract must have been with a previously used contractor for the same services or products, and the lapse in time from the expiration of the prior contract cannot be more than 24 months. That's the ones that we saw tonight. Those are the criteria. Also, an interesting thing in this policy is that it states that the finance department has a monthly report that shows all of our contracts and our expenditures. And I think that we had talked about this at our one of our retreats, that this report does exist and it's something that we can see. So that was it for that policy. Should we discuss that first, or?
Well, actually, if there is no discussion, that's fine. I'm not going to force anybody to have a discussion about it. The main purpose is to make sure that we reviewed it. So what was the date that was adopted was 1997
It was
as well?
adopted in 1997 and was revised in December, it says December 19th, 2023. That's because the $35,000 limit went up. Yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can go to the next one. Thank you.
The next one is policy 4.32, which is on the tax abatement. And I think we've seen some of these already come before the board, but basically it says that any taxing district, like the Board of Education or the City of Rockford, can abate any portion of its real estate taxes on property located in an enterprise zone or in a river edge redevelopment zone. The abatement can only be on new improvements or renovations on existing property. And then the policy goes on to outline what properties qualify for an abatement and how the application must be filed. And then it states that the abatement is completely up to the board's discretion. So this is when someone is revamping something that's in our district that they want to not pay property tax on for, say, the first 3 years or 5 years or whatever. That's something that we can approve or disapprove. The policy states that the property owner has to also ask for an abatement from the City of Rockford if they're asking for it from us. So that's all I had.
Thank you very much. Attorney Goldsmith?
Yes, I just wanted to give a very brief historical context, and I'm sure you are probably aware, but these board policies, many of them were in existence long before 1997. 1997 is the year that the Illinois Association of School Boards created a compilation of policies that many school districts adopted for uniformity. So I just wanted to give that context that all the policies did not just appear and become adopted in 1997. They existed before then, but were adopted in the format that the IASB presented in 1997.
Thank you. Mrs. Bennett?
Okay, I didn't do a summary like Ms. Stanford, overachiever. I can give my my summary that I'm making up right now. No, I did review. I did review both policies. I did my due diligence. I contacted legal. I contacted Dr. Brown. So policy 4.62 regarding district travel. So 14 days notice in advance of travel to be submitted. This policy is very straightforward. And I reached out and asked about if there was any discussion or any feedback that the district had received that 14 days was problematic for staff or any kind of feedback like that. And I was told that there hadn't been. So that is policy 4.62. And also that staff would attempt to utilize whenever possible Rockford Airport instead of other airports to help with cost. Anybody have questions on that policy? Okay, see, I did a great job. Okay. Next is 4.65, which is fraud prevention. And this policy outlines in very, very great detail all of the definitions and then kind of the responsibilities and procedures within the policy for reporting and investigating, in addition to whose roles are to do what. And so one follow-up slash suggestion that was made when I talked to Dr. Brown was about the word designee. So if you pull up the policy on page 2, there's several times when the word designee was included here. And so for transparency and just to make sure that if somebody needed to utilize the policy, needed to have instruction on what to do, they would know what to do. And his recommendation was potentially CFO to be in that spot. So for example, under page 2, general policy responsibilities, it would say the superintendent or CFO. And there's all kinds of things if you read this policy to talk about if it was superintendent who was committing the fraud, if it was CFO who was committing the fraud, all of the different ways that different individuals would be involved, clearly not those individuals. Yes, and then, yeah, prevention of fraud is also included. So anybody have questions on that?
In the segment that it talks about if it's the superintendent or legal, the board was not necessarily mentioned in that in terms of reporting to. So that is, I've put a star by that to revisit in terms of revising the reporting part, but that's not something that I need to discuss. It was just something that I noticed.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I also did not do a formal summary, but the first policy that I reviewed was 4.87, which was titled Voluntary Payroll Deductions to Charitable Organizations. And so that's just about employees having the opportunity to have charitable organization deductions from their paychecks. And it cites to state statutes, and it's in line with those state statutes, and it looked pretty straightforward to me, and I did not have any thoughts about it. It was enacted in 05, reviewed 2022. The second one was 4.152, which is naming schools or other facilities, which is somewhat interesting. It requires that if a school is going to be named for a person. Well, it provides a process for community members or anybody else to request that a school be named for a person or anything, I guess. And it states that if a person's name, if a school's or facility is going to be named for a person, the person must have been deceased for a minimum of 2 years and shall have made a significant contribution to society. And then it requires a petition, and I think it goes to the superintendent, and then there's a recommendation to the board. So I didn't have any problems or thoughts that it should be changed or anything. I thought it was well thought out and made sense to me. And there was actually somebody had come to me before I had reviewed this about, there was a teacher, I think, from West that passed away this year that there was some thought about trying to rename, I think, the auditorium or something at West, if I recall right. And I see that the policy would allow that after he's been deceased for 2 years. So if anybody has any questions about those, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. And again, it's not, if you reviewed it and there is no question, because there will come a time for revision if it's necessary, just for a public knowledge and accountability. And when I noticed that some hadn't been reviewed, I just felt it was necessary. Ms. Haley?
So I reviewed policy 4.180. It's under operational services. It's the application to establish a public charter. Basically, this policy describes the process of an entity who wishes to establish a charter school and in the school district, and the steps they need to follow along with timelines. There are a couple of issues that I found with this particular policy. One is that the wording, application and petition, I'm not sure if they're, it seems like they're just being used interchangeably here. But I feel that it would be better if they were more consistent language. So that is something I would like to actually review and just get more clarification so that the policy is more clear. And also the timelines for submitting the application. So those are just a couple of the things with the application. I think everything else in the policy here regarding the public meeting notices and providing public feedback and the school district responding to that public feedback before making a decision on the charter application were pretty straightforward. It's just a couple of things there with the interchangeability of the language of application versus petition. And just that I think that there needs to be a little bit more clarification on if a charter school is revising their application, if it's sent back, how that timeline restarts. The second policy I reviewed was policy 5.08 regarding, it's under personnel, employee policies and recruitment. Again, this policy is really short and it was very straightforward. The only thing that I found that could be added was an and, the word and. And here's the particular sentence here I'm referring to. A written application, e.g. online application, and an interview or other personnel assessments will be required. So, my consideration is to just add and or other personnel assessments to that policy.
Thank you. Were you done? All right. So in relation to the recruitment piece, I think that the policy ought to reflect the DEI initiative as well, and that's something that we will visit to add it to the policy to reflect the work that we're doing. That's the only thing I had on that one.
And that was it for me.
I had policies 535 and 525. 535 is the employment selection process for administrative employees. I do think there's an opportunity to update how that process looks and maybe some to reflect the current organizational chart in HR. Pretty simple fixes, and I know that we probably time to reflect on only talking about advertising in newspapers and periodicals. I think we're hopefully beyond that and maybe can reflect that. As far as 525, the reasonable accommodation, all the language I think is really solid. It's very transparent and a very solid policy.
So you have 535 and 525? Vice President McCall?
Okay, I had policy 5187, the employee assistance program. As Attorney Goldsmith had mentioned, that these policies were adopted in 1997 as a part of a uniformity. So as I was reading it, it seems to me like a pretty standard and straightforward EAP program. So I didn't see any changes or anything for that one. Then I had policy number 5.55, personnel, mandatory drug and alcohol testing. Previously said that it was revised in 2015. So I just wanted to make sure that we reviewed it. And as I was reviewing it, I wanted to have some type of language in it regarding, if it's supposed to, regarding the legalization of marijuana and the medical marijuana uses and recreational things like that. So I wanted to see if it was something that reflects that within this policy. I saw was some stuff was redlined, but I don't understand, or if somebody could explain to me how this policy would look in light of the new state law changes. Other than that, it looked like it was straightforward to me.
Yeah, that was what I referenced earlier. This policy in particular, the red line, it says may be. Yeah. The reason we kept may be drug tested is, again, we have certain positions that we will have to drug test, and so we wanted the language with the option to be able to. But what this changes is us mandatorily doing a pre-employment drug screen for all. So that will be eliminated, and we'll only be able to, we would only enact that on positions that need it based off of other federal guidelines. But then the policy also allows us to continue to do reasonable suspicion.
Okay. So
that really prompted because of the legalization of marijuana, and we're seeing many failed tests based off of that. And so that's the adoption of the adaptation of that policy.
Correct. And so the Drug-Free School Zones Act, federal law, is still applicable to schools, and recreational use of marijuana is not allowable. Right. So the reference that Mr. Zedeker is making is to the pre-employment process that he's, leaving out, not weeding out, leaving out, leaving out the pre-screening drugs. But, the requirement still remains for all district employees to be drug-free.
Gotcha. Mrs. Bennett.
For the policy, when it says prospective new hires and it says maybe, where will it be documented what positions would be required versus those that, at least what you referenced earlier, saying that like a decision could be made to do that versus like IDOT requirements? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what the use of may allows administration to still have the flexibility if we so choose to do that. Certainly, it would be transportation, but also employees in our RBMA group who potentially could drive a bus so that they would still. And then it also allows us the flexibility in that policy for post-accident drug screenings. So it gives us still the flexibility to do the things that are mandatory for IDOT and other federal. But I think, and Attorney Goldsmith can talk more about this, but leaving the word may in there does give the administration the ability to do it if we so chose. But it is the intent to only do it for employees that it's a requirement for.
So I feel like with the inclusion of the word may, if I am a staff or a personnel, how will I know if this, I understand like reasonable suspicion, but I guess I'm looking for more clarity on may allows administration to make the choice, but how is that being communicated to staff of if they will may or may not?
That would happen in the new hire appointment. So if it was something that we decided in terms of a role, that would be in the employment offer and then the new hire appointment. That's how we communicate it now. But those processes are in place if we were to choose that. I don't see that happening. And I know in talking to Attorney Holdley in terms of listing jobs, our jobs changed, so we didn't want to list specific roles. But it would be communicated either through the employment offer or during that new hire appointment when they do the fingerprint and background checks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for my policies?
You know, and where it relates to the drug-free workplace, I think that it'd be a good idea to add to the policy or the administrative regulations. That is another area of opportunity that we have, is updating the administrative regulations that is associated with the policies. And I think that will answer a lot of questions, because there was a policy that indicated that it is the employee's responsibility to know the policies. So, of course I don't have a problem with that, but I do believe that they ought to be able to rely on the administrative regulation where it is associated with the policy. So for every policy, nearly every policy, there should be an administrative regulation that is very clear to employees to understand. And it should be made available. There was an issue before with policies that was accessible on the web hadn't been current either. So whatever means of information that is made available for employees, it should be very clear and understood. Not everyone understands state statute and that, so I think that we ought to make it very clear in policies what is the expectation of the employee. So thank you all very much. There is a policy 755 special program adopted August 18th, 2018. No review, revised. I have a duplicate date here. As I pulled that up, there is screening test entrance criteria. So I'm very supportive of special programming. But again, as we move with diversity, equity, and inclusion, we want to keep that in mind with the special programming as well, and what that looked like. We heard earlier that everyone learns different. They don't test well. So how will that inclusion piece be made available for our students if we're testing in order to get into special programming? So that's just something to think about. We don't have to have an answer tonight, but that is something that we should consider. And then it indicates, the principal of special program or director of special programs. So as the principal of special program an old term or used for special programs? So that's just another opportunity for updating? Okay, very good. And then the dance policy. So that's been a while, and of course, we went through a pandemic, so no one was dancing unless they, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was delayed because I was trying to catch up to you. The reference to it says at different points in the 7.55 policies that different people can submit questions or whatever by contacting the principal of the special program. Is that what you're asking about? So there are different principals at each of those special program buildings, and I think that's the reference that you're referring to?
So
where it says administrative regulations shall be posted and made available on request to the principal of the special program?
So that could be understood that there is not the principal of the school. So if the principal of the school is the same as the principal of programs, you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Exactly. Thank you. Was there anything else, Mrs. Goldsman? Okay. So the 7.355 dance policy. I think some schools it's different than it used to be. So, and of course we will need to revise this because it talks about, requesting for a guest and, if a guest is a college student, but I'm not sure that any of the schools is practicing that. Having guests, because I've heard complaints from students that they couldn't invite other students from other schools. So we probably need to clarify that policy and universal for each school. So that is, and we'll have any recommendations for the board members, any recommendations, and this may be a process. We don't want to inundate legal with policy revision, but that is something that we will have to do. So even after tonight, if you have any ideas or suggestions, go ahead and forward that to Lori or Attorney Holtley and Attorney Goldsmith. Okay. We are now on, yes. That we're going to look something. 5.55. One moment. So the policy 5.55, we did discuss that, a revision to mandatory drug and alcohol testing to reflect current employment screen best practice. Board policy 5.7 is a revision to religious holidays and describes an equitable process by which the district may grant an employee requests for time off to observe a religious holiday. Policy 7.185 is an updated to mirror the statutory language addressing court-related domestic violence transfers is inserted and linked to additional source available to the community is added. Are there any questions or comments regarding policy 5.55 and policy 5.70? Mr. Carpenter?
I did have a question on 5.55. I was wondering if it would be possible to add some non-discrimination language to that, because when it says may be required and there's discretion, I just think it's important to make sure that discretion is not being used in a discriminatory fashion. I don't think anybody would intentionally be doing that, but I think that should be added to. I wonder if that could be added to that policy.
For policy 7.185, teen dating violence, in my conversations with Attorney Holdley, the policy has to be revised at this moment to reflect statutory language, but it would be the intention of the committee that's working on teen dating violence to bring revisions to the board at a later time, so more up-to-date policy, much more robust policy, but this is a placeholder to be up to date at current moment, so.
There is anyone else?
Yes, may I add something for the good of the cause? And this is not entirely an appropriate place to put it, but I did not want to allow the board to leave tonight with a misperception that may have been presented by a student in Dr. Reed's presentation, where the student said she felt bullied because the office personnel indicated to her that if she called again to use a mental health day, that she might be referred to staff. That is a statutory language that says the students have 5 mental health days to use, but after they use 2, they may be referred to appropriate school personnel. So I wanted to dispel any concern that the board may have that was any discriminatory intent. That is what the statute provides.
Is that something that the attendance office is to share, or is that a conversation that the school should have with the parent, a separate conversation?
I'm sure they had that conversation with the parent because the student is not supposed to call in for themselves. The policy requires that the parent guardian is supposed to call in with any valid excuse for absence, including mental health. So that conversation would have been directed to the parent guardian who called in to have the absence excused.
Okay, so off the grid hypothetical, say a student pretended to be the parent. And so my question is that a conversation to be had over the phone, or should it be something more personable?
I think it certainly can happen over the phone because many of our families have transportation issues. So telephonic and electronic communications are reduced barriers to conversations that the schools must have.
Okay, so a parent calls in and to report a mental health day.
Yes.
And so if he or she is reporting a mental health day, there could be an issue at home. Mm-hmm. The reason why I discouraged that at that time is because you're not being necessarily sympathetic or empathetic to what could be going on at that. I think that there is another way to communicate that to the parent, in my opinion. And just as a means of customer service and building relationship with families and students, that is something I think that as the school and school counselors work, and it could be a phone conference, yes. But I think in that moment is a little inappropriate.
You're entitled to the opinion. I just believe it was intended in a supportive and intervention type manner.
I understand. Oh. And the student was just expressing. And right. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. We have we're now on to the petition and communication portion of the meeting. We invite public to make comments. The board will not respond to the comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you will be contacted in a timely manner by staff. Each speaker, we only have one tonight, is allotted no more than 3 minutes to address the board. It is not appropriate to discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. If you look to your left, you will see 2 digital clocks. One shows the total time allotted to public comments, and one shows the total time for each speaker. Thank you for your cooperation with the guidelines. Now we will have a speaker, Nathaniel Surin.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? All right. So I am here to speak in opposition to the plan and decision to postpone the last day of senior attendance to Wednesday, May 22nd. I trust that you've all been receiving my emails and my fellow students' Let's Talk forms about why we disagree with this change. So rather than speaking with those points tonight, I hope to offer some questions and situations to consider before fully proceeding with this postponement. At the beginning of the meeting, I heard that the RPS mission is to provide is to provide a first-class education cooperatively and collaboratively. So please keep that in mind. So first of all, the last day of senior attendance is set not to comply with the 176 state-mandated days of attendance. Rather, it is set to give seniors and staff time to prepare for graduation. According to board policy section 600.6.20, events like graduation are set once a year, and it would stand to reason that the last day of senior attendance based on graduation would also be set once a year. That time between senior attendance and graduation is not just time for seniors to pal around town, but instead it is used to determine class rank and GPA and make sure that they are as accurate as possible. It's also designed to provide teachers and failing students time to make up work and provide more students the honor of walking across the stage at graduation. Postponing the last day of attendance merely reduces that time and support for these students. I know many of my fellow students would not use those 3 days to make up the work during those 3 days of attendance. So it's really just postponing the time that students and staff get to work one-on-one to correct any assignment failures or anything of the such so that they can graduate. So please consider how much this change to postpone senior attendance 3 more days actually provides our scholars with a first-class education, one that I believe should involve that support built into the last days before graduation. Next, I hope you all consider the message that such a change might send to our community. I believe it sends a message that RPS is unpredictable. Scholars deal with enough chaos as it is. As Dr. Reed mentioned, students may feel that everything is moving but them. During the past several years, seniors' last day of attendance has been presented to the community at the beginning of the year, unaffected by emergency days, and even the change of the semester during 2020.
Nathan, your time is up. Thank you.
Sorry.
I can tell you that Dr. Gallagher and the communications team is in the process of preparing a response and should have one by tomorrow. So you can hear what the district rationale is. And thank you for coming out to speak tonight. I just wanted you to know that we are developing a response to those per the conversations with the board and also in response to some of the student outreach we received. So thank you for speaking tonight.
If there are no comments or agenda recommendations by the board, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn. Oh, I'm so sorry. Bring your mic a little closer to you. I guess I'm looking at you and I'm not.
Oh, I had a comment, but you have something else, so do you want to say your thing?
Oh, was there a section of the agenda that got missed? The preview of the consent items for the governance committee?
So the Thank you. I'll go off the board docs. The review of consent items, meeting minutes, B, memorandum understanding, RAA, registered behavior technician, supervisor, differential, freedom of information log. Anyone have any questions? Mr.
No, sorry.
Chen, I will. That's not indicated. Any questions? Or Ms.
Mine is just a comment. So I wanted to make a statement about the recent allegations that have come out about the Juvenile Detention Center. So I've been in contact with Dr. Jarrett. I've contacted Director of Student Services just to share my concerns about things that were alleged to be occurring inside the detention center, so specifically regarding education of students, so how much education is being provided to students, FTEs of teachers, all of the things that fall under the realm of RPS 205. So I watched the county board meeting last week, and it was kind of disheartening to see lots of different county board members to kind of be dismissive of the report. So the governing body of the Juvenile Detention Center complete a report, and I don't have all the exact, so don't quote me on these things, but something like 9 staff and 16 youth contributed to lived experience qualitative interviews about things inside the detention center. So I guess given the sample size of those reports, many county board members wanted to dismiss it, saying like, we don't know if this is accurate and all these things. And that's their prerogative. However, other county board members were looking to this report to say that there are areas of improvement that can happen. There are things that can be checked on, be looked into, and so just wanted to make a comment about it because those are our students. It's their constitutional right to be provided an education. So I just want to make sure that RPS is having conversations, which I know that they are, just regarding the treatment and how they are being provided services inside the detention center. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts or not. That's okay if you don't, but.
I had an opportunity to attend the county board meeting. And so JDC is faced with many challenges that RPS 205 is faced with. And this clearly goes to show that the opportunity for our community to pay attention to the needs of our students. And many may have a different view in regards to educating students while they're in JDC. And it is unfortunate to say in an indirect way or a roundabout way that in describing the facility in the way that it was. But we have an opportunity. There's expenses that come with educating our students. And it cannot solely be RPS 205 responsibility, although the responsibility have been put on us. I think that we have an opportunity to look at other areas of financial support and the county to look, as we are forced to look at ways to improve staffing and work conditions and conditions for our students as well as our teachers, that they have an opportunity that faces them as well. And I think that working together and making sure that everyone that have students at JDC be as engaged and involved as well.
I agree, and I think even over the past few months, so I toured the Juvenile Detention Center in the summertime. There was a contract that had come up right when I was sworn in, and so I wanted to see the places, right, that this is a space where our youth are going, and so I wanted to see the space, in addition to really understand how a lot of RPS funding does go into this space, and all the Chromebooks that students have access to, the special education software, all the performance monitoring that we do is other school districts' children in addition to ours. And so So I think it is a lot of funding, and it is a lot of accountability that does need to be provided back to the district, because it is the expectation those children are receiving services. And if they're not, then intervention needs to happen. So one of the things that was discussed was about the mental health programming inside of the detention center. So 1.5 therapists are contracted to be there, and that's lovely. But if a student is in a space where they can't even receive more than 30 minutes of education, is that student also then in a therapeutic setting for the day? Like, there, in my opinion, there needs to be so much more follow-up on what interventions are happening, because a lot of funding is being provided for that to occur. So
I absolutely agree, and I'm confident that we will do our part in making sure that our students are well taken care of, despite where they're at. You are absolutely right. They deserve more than 30 minutes of education. And for our students that are there, we need to make sure that that's happening. Anyone else? Very good. I apologize for the oversight. If there's not anything else, I take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Have a good night. Thank you.